There is a reality we cannot ignore when we talk about this tragedy. More than 40% of black women experience domestic violence in their lifetime. That's according to the Institute of Women's Policy Research. And so we want to bring in an expert who is dedicated to supporting a community that is often overlooked. Joining me now is Karma Cottman, the CEO of Ujima. This is a national resource center specifically focused on supporting the black community through domestic, sexual, and community violence. And so, Karma, we thank you for making time on just a really, really heartbreaking day.
Thank you for having me, and I am heartbroken as well.
So I know you've heard the stories coming into our interview. Justin Fairfax had been essentially ordered to leave his home by April 30th. It sounds like access to his children, his money, his assets, all of that was about to change. And so these court documents appear to paint a picture of him spiraling for years and now losing really control of everything. From your experience, have you seen violence escalate when it appears everything is lost?
Leslie, it's been so difficult because, yes, we have seen that violence can escalate, and we're reminded that domestic violence is a pattern, right? And so while we see that there can be one incident that leads to something horrific, what we know is that there's been a cycle and a pattern of violence, which is what we've heard, right? That there have been many incidences over a length of time and a period of time. And so we are reminded that domestic violence is very serious, that it can end in fatality, that we have to believe survivors, and that yes, there can be an incident that leads to something as fatal and heartbreaking as this.
Dr. Cerina Fairfax filed for divorce. The couple was still living together. Is it common for survivors to remain in the same home during a contested divorce, and how dangerous is that?
It is dangerous. It's absolutely dangerous, but it is something that we see happen. Um, Survivors have to make choices not only about their own safety, but about the safety of their children, about the surrounding for their children, about taking their children from their school and from their natural environment. And so survivors often make the choice to keep their children safe, to keep their children in an environment that feels comforting, into an environment that feels normal, particularly in an instant like this when this family has lived publicly, has had such incredible upheaval. This mom might and did, it seems like, make a choice to sacrifice her safety for the livelihood of her children.
You know, whenever we do these kinds of stories about domestic violence, and Chief Davis said this during his press conference earlier today, that there are some red flags that people may not have fully realized. People often say, why didn't that person leave? And we know that moment is the most dangerous. And you add a firearm. And I'm just curious, because I'm looking at the statistics here from your organization, which are staggering. When you add a firearm, what does that mean for black women specifically?
For Black women, we are 6 times more likely to die as a result of domestic violence, particularly when there is a firearm available. And so what we know is that the possession of access to a firearm often leads to harm for Black women. And I have to repeat this over and over again because one of the very first things we know that survivors encounter when they talk about domestic violence is this question like, why didn't you leave? And what we know from experience, what we know from survivors is that moment when a survivor chooses to seek safety, to share what has happened in their relationship, that is the moment that their relationship becomes the most dangerous.
You know, our hearts and minds just keep going to the children, right? They've
Right.
lost their parents, their home is a crime scene, and they were there. The son called police. What happens to children who witness or experience this kind of loss?
I think that is what just gives me so much pain and so much pause. We know that these children's lives will never be the same. There is years and years of harm that's caused not only by domestic violence incidents in the moment, but by what we are seeing in terms of the discussions that are going to happen that they have access to online. And so they are having to relive this moment over and over again. What we know happens is there's incredible mental harm that happens. There can be physical harm. There are lifelong real life consequences to someone living in a home where there is domestic violence, but then where there is this kind of incident where a child has seen their parents harmed. It's irreparable.
I just, before you leave, because we've got you here and you never know who's watching and who might see this and might be moved to do something differently, what is the one thing you want people to know who may need help?
The one thing that I want people to know is that we have to believe survivors when they tell us. Very often we hear or we think that a survivor looks like a particular thing or should say a particular thing. And what I remind people over and over again is that there is no face to domestic violence. It can impact any of us. So if someone tells you, believe them. Figure out and learn about resources that are available to yourself, to your family, to your friends. Know the domestic violence hotline, which is 1-800-799-SAFE. You can visit our website to learn about other resources, but also become aware. Understand what is happening in relationships. And when someone comes to you and they say that something has happened, we've got to believe them. We've got to trust them.
Karma Cottman, CEO of Ujima, we thank you for your voice and your work on this. And again, all of us are thinking of the entire Fairfax family tonight in the wake of just this devastating loss.
Thank you.